Weather conditions, external risks, and hidden technical malfunctions sometimes make unexpected adjustments to the work of pilots. Passengers do not always have to survive an easy landing. However, the quick reaction of the crew and the skill of the pilots makes it possible to avoid fatal consequences. In this video, we will tell you about an incredible story in which a plane at an altitude of about 8,000 meters suddenly lost its roof. You will find out what happened to the plane next and whether the passengers managed to survive at the end of the video. Friends, before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like it. The story took place in 1988 in the Hawaiian Islands. This marine archipelago, consisting of many individual islands, is quite densely populated, and the provision of transportation needs of residents was carried out as a rule by aviation forces. At the same time, it was considerable. Quite roomy Boeing 737s of various modifications of that time flew on many lines. April 28, 1988 was a very ordinary day, which did not portend anything special. The traditional pre-flight inspection of the liner did not show any deviations. The passengers of flight AQ-243 boarded the Boeing 737-297, which was supposed to fly from Hilo to Honolulu. That day, no one could have imagined that a terrible thing would happen a few minutes after takeoff. The takeoff was excellent. There were no signs of panic or excitement. 89 passengers and 6 crew members were calmly traveling to Honolulu, but suddenly, after 23 minutes of flight, the roof of the plane broke off. This was part of the 35 square meter skin above the front 6 rows of the aircraft. At that moment, the plane was at an altitude of about 8,000 meters. The passengers found themselves in the open air at a speed of 500 kilometers per hour and at a temperature of about -45 degrees Celsius. Just imagine the feeling of fierce cold, insane panic, fear. All this was instantly experienced by the people on board the plane. A stream of incoming air violently blew into their faces. They were starved of oxygen and began to suffocate. A real hurricane was raging in the cabin of the plane. There was not enough air. The passengers could not put on oxygen masks. They simply did not exist. The crew immediately began to descend to the minimum height to allow the people to breathe. Flight attendant Michael Hondani could not contact the pilots because the communication cables between the cabin were damaged. She couldn't even figure out if the pilots were alive. Nevertheless, the woman did not lose her composure. She tried to calm the passengers, help them to group up, and prevented a mess in the cabin. She had to act alone in this extreme situation, as her partner Jane was injured and unconscious, and the senior flight attendant didn't respond. The pilots understood that with such damage, the aircraft could not continue flying, and it was a miracle that it didn't fall apart and collapse at all. It had to be put away immediately before everything turned into fatal consequences. And the sooner, the better. The nearest airport capable of receiving a Boeing-class aircraft was Kahului Airport on the island of Maui. The co-pilot Madeline Tompkins, despite communication problems, managed to contact the dispatch service of this airport. Emergency services on the ground were put on high alert. The captain of the aircraft, Robert Schornsteimer, began to make an emergency landing. However, he faced several more problems. At first, he noticed that the plane was flying at too high a speed of 315 km per hour, while the recommended landing speed was in the range of 250 to 290 km per hour. All attempts to slow down were useless due to damage to the control systems. Another problem was the full fuel tanks. Usually, before an extreme landing, the plane flies for several hours, burning fuel to the last liter. If the fuel explodes during landing, none of those on board will have a single chance to survive. Of course, it was not allowed to fly for several more hours, since the plane could fall apart at any moment. Then, when landing, the front landing gear exit sensor didn't work, and the plane went on a second lap. Observers from the ground reported that the landing gear actually came out. You can sit down. By the time of the second landing attempt, the left engine had failed. The captain of the aircraft had no choice but to land the plane with one engine, which further increased the likelihood of an unsuccessful landing. 11 minutes after the roof cladding was torn off, the airplane landed safely at Kahului Airport and was able to stop with the help of one engine reversing and regular brakes. Thanks to the coordinated actions and skill of the crew, none of the passengers were killed. Only 65 of them were injured of varying degrees of severity. But with such a terrible disaster, everything could have been much worse. The only victim of this accident was the senior 58-year-old flight attendant, Clarabelle Lansing, who at the moment of the roof skin tear was in the middle of the airplane and was not fastened and was thrown out by the airflow. At the same time as the airplane stopped, passengers began evacuating the plane using inflatable ladders. Airport staff did not work so smoothly, as there were no clear recommendations in case of emergency situations. Besides, there were only 2 ambulances on the island. Therefore, the victims were taken out by buses of a local tourist company. Fortunately, apart from the already mentioned flight attendant, no one else was killed. Due to severe damage, the aircraft was subject to write-off, as the amount of repairs exceeded the cost of the aircraft itself. In addition to the direct disruption of the fuselage, the vital stabilizers, without which flight is impossible in principle, were almost completely destroyed. The fuselage itself was actually held up as if by a single floor covering. Immediately after the incident, his investigation began. Numerous studies have shown that the cause of the disaster was the deterioration of the aircraft body caused by too frequent takeoff and landing cycles. It was aggravated by the fact that the aircraft was operated in marine conditions, with high humidity and salt levels, which literally corroded the metal. In addition, the Commission drew attention to the insufficient strength of the rivets and epoxy bonds of the fuselage. The incident had a pretty strong impact on the development of aviation in general. For this type of aircraft, an additional layer of skin was added, as well as the fuselage manufacturing process was changed. In 1991, the captain of the aircraft, Robert Schornsteimer, filed a lawsuit against Boeing over emotional stress. Then it was reported that the lawsuit was settled out of court. Co-pilot Madeline Tompkins continued to fly and later became a commander at Hawaiian Airlines. Schornsteimer himself flew until 2005 and retired from Aloha Airlines 3 years before it ceased to exist. Friends, what struck you most about this story? Write your opinion in the comments. We also advise you to watch our other interesting videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.